work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it, stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it, heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it, work for it, ride for it, I'ma organize for it, stay up in the night and in the morning I'ma rise for it, heart for it, mind for it, ears for it, eyes for it, peace and a place on this earth for me and mine for it.
Right. Yeah, we're rolling, so we can start whenever.
All right.
Get some levels. Today, in a world.
We're in the backyard doing some media criticism.
It's a stormy one.
Welcome to Money, Power, Land, Solidarity.
Solidarity.
Ding, dong, 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 dong.
Yeah, so we're here gathered today in the backyard in South Minneapolis, a stone's throw away from the famed Powderhorn Park.
We're right on the edge of Powderhorn, historic moment.
Yeah. We today are gathered to do some media criticism, to really engage with this reporting on policing and power in Minneapolis, the podcast called The Field, and the article that came out. But first, it's post-debate night in America.
Yeah.
Do we get any hot takes on the debate?
I was like, I'm not going to lie, I was like looking forward to the spectacle of a declining empire, but it was really just sad at the end of it all. I don't know. I was pretty wiped by the end of the day, and so once the debate came on, I think it just like... It was just, it was kind of depressing.
I just got really lit like halfway through and then just went on Amazon and bought a lot of things. So that was how I handled my stress last night and watching two really old white dudes just like talk over each other. Yeah. Yeah,
I tuned in towards the end, and it's this weird thing where like, it takes a lot of courage to tune in, kind of, because it's like really, if you like look at it soberly, it's like a really sad, embarrassing situation that these two men are up there fumbling around. It's like a slap in the face. It feels so violent, but then also all you can do is kind of laugh at it. The one thing I noticed, like my biggest takeaway, was in the back. I think I'm remembering this right, but in like the back of the stage set.
The We the People?
It was like, and I think it said like Union and Constitution forever or something like that. And I was thinking like, damn, they really know what's at stake though, as far as like how disgusted people are with this country. Like that stood out to me, I guess.
Yeah. Isaac made sure we watched like one of the more offending but like typical coverages of the debate, ABC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where like you have like they have the panel in the beginning, like the round table, and it's all the commentators and all their political angles, and I just always cringe when I see Chris
the
Christie.
flavors of moderation.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris Christie was up there?
Chris Christie's like one of ABC's panel people now.
Was he the governor when you were in New Jersey? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jersey strong, baby.
That's great.
Closing bridges when we want.
Yeah. Is Tim Pawlenty on one of them channels? I figure he'll be up there someday.
He's probably just like chilling at the cabin perpetually.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I just couldn't handle like watching people trying to seriously dissect it. But yeah,
for real though.
So I'd rather watch a bunch of ghouls like caw over it, anyways.
Yeah, I seen some of the takes. I really only seen the end of it. And I guess another reflection I had, because I watched it on NBC, was that like we've been watching Donald Trump bully people on TV for like 20 years, and like realizing like how seamless the transition was from him being on NBC, kind of playing that same character, but now he's the fucking president. Like that sucks.
Yeah. It was a seamless transition for him too. It was like get fired from NBC one day, start your presidential campaign the next day, like.
And he used to be like on wrestling shows, right? Like he used to be like an announcer, and I just always think of him in that context when I don't know, he brings that energy to the debate stage of like a show person.
Honestly. And you could see why it's like he is an idiot, and I don't want to say anything that credits him, but I think people are dismissive of how talented he is playing that role. You know, like he really tricked a lot of people. He did. Or he's compelling in the media. I think it's important actually that we started talking that way, because one of the points I wanted to make when we're like digging into this podcast and the article is like, for my family, the people who are listening to this and all of us trying to make sense of the world around us, is bringing like a materialist critique to the table when we consume media. So the idea is like, yeah, Trump has been on NBC. A lot of there was like a particular executive, I don't remember his name, who went from NBC to CNN, and you look at the inordinate amount of coverage that CNN gave Trump all the way through his career, and acknowledging that these are ruling class institutions that are deeply invested in the tax breaks, for example, of Donald Trump, the overall economic policies. And I think that's reflected in the New York Times piece, like the type of coverage that they came here with. They were on an ideological mission to like really discredit the idea of abolition, and it shows in like who they chose to talk to and how they chose to frame things. And like just off top for us to remember that when we're consuming so much media is like people are invested in the outcomes of these stories and like the impact the stories could have.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that like the New York Times has historically like been complicit in and enabled fascism.
Wow.
I mean, like the Iraq War comes to mind, them like being on a complete war tilt, going all the way back to like Hitler and how they spoke of him before the war started. So like, I'm not surprised by this coverage and the fact that they had like a narrative they wanted to show before they even started interviewing people. And I think that was apparent to me really quickly into this, the Daily, The Field special edition.
Hell yeah. Should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I'll just start like, this is like a little critique I had, but it starts with this like soapy mood where like Asted's walking through Powderhorn Park and he refers to Powderhorn Pond as a lake. And so I like right away I was like, you don't know the community.
For real.
It's a puddle.
But yeah.
Yeah. My opening notes is like, I made a note that they started both with like sound bites from the rally at Powderhorn Park and then the reporter being in Powderhorn Park. And I guess that's like a place for me to just dive into. I think one of my fundamental critiques of the piece is the way they open it and frame it. It completely renders invisible the uprising, the people who actually forced all of this to happen, like the hundreds of people who sieged the precinct, who burned the precinct, who appropriated goods, who caused the crisis. It's like they barely show up in this story, even from the start. And
they wash over it completely. Like I remember there's a line where he says the event changed the pledge event in the park changed the trajectory between Minneapolis and the police, like completely glossing over like years and decades of community organizing and the fucking lynching of George Floyd that like precipitated them having to like, get on that stage in the first place.
Exactly.
Well, in the article, they when like talking about like previous, work by community organizers or activists with government, they just start with 2015 and Jamar Clark's death, and to like not, it's not nearly a full picture or comprehensive to like it just embedded and century, 150, more than 150 years of this work.
Yeah, completely misrepresents the relationship between the city and the police and the mood here. And I think, again, going back to that materialist critique is like one of the main things that they wanted to do coming here, I think, or tried to accomplish was writing the poor people out of the story, writing the dangerous insurgent elements that actually have power out of the story. And like it starts with this moment of co-optation. And I think that's like off top, like a critique that runs through the whole piece.
Yeah. I feel like it gets, the first person they interview is Miskey, right, from Black Visions.
Yeah.
And then they set the scene for like this kind of progressive liberal Democrat city council, which like progressive has no meaning. Like, that's not a benchmark for anything at this point. But like going into the interviews with city council and the meeting specifically, like hearing the recordings from the pledge, like they were hyped on that stage. The city council was like eating that shit up.
They really were. It's Andrew Johnson, you should be so embarrassed with yourself. But like you hear him giving that speech and all of them are like feeling the crowd, and then to hear the juxtaposition of where they're at now. And we both saw that at the moment. Like if you knew these people at all, you could see completely through that nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Well, like his soundbite on the podcast, and also what they include in the article, is that he described that he was with people in spirit, and that he did not at all literally mean defund the police in spirit. And he's like laughing when he says that.
He's
and
laughing
I just wanted, he's coward.
Coward. That's the word I've used the most to describe him. And like even my brother pointed it out when he listened to it, as far as like, damn, they're really up there laughing at us.
Yeah.
Like he thought that shit was super funny, like a joke. Like, I didn't sign a paper. Come on. It's like, bro, that's so disrespectful. Like
even like Philippe was laughing in his little section too. And I was like, you were just like castigating city council members in like a meeting for like going back on their word on abolition. And then here you are laughing in this New York Times thing when you're being like pressed by a... Yeah, I don't know.
And doesn't come off much better than Andrew Johnson, a little more tactful, but really slippery, you know, and like it just, honestly, I felt like Jeremiah sounded strong, like to take an account of all the city council interviews. Like I'm hesitant to give any of them credit right now, but I think he stood on his principle, and I like the way that he stood up to those questions. You know, there's like this constant drive and thrust in the piece to try to paint the city councilors as out of touch with the conservative Minneapolis, which is a poor frame, but Jeremiah stood up to it. You know, I thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And he owned it, and he said, I agree. I do believe in abolition. And he'll have to prove that still, but at least he didn't immediately back off his square.
Yeah, I've seen him be pretty critical of the story overall on like Twitter.
Yeah.
Like I saw.
I seen that too. I had... Do we want to like orient ourselves back in the flow of the podcast? No, it's all good because I don't know where.
Well, like so, like chronologically, it goes from talking about like setting the scene, and then it like plays through those two city council meetings. It says like things change really rapidly over the course of like a week or whatever from these two city council meetings, and the second one is where like it starts with Philippe being like, "I'm done with reform," and I'm like. Not interested with tinkering with this anymore. Yeah.
And right before that, you said this before too, that there's a frame made that he says, you know, uses the word progressive bubble, says Jacob Fry is in the city council are liberal Democrats and progressives. So that right there are assertions that should be challenged, as far as like Jacob Fry endorsed Amy Klobuchar, who also the New York Times endorsed. What makes Jacob Fry like a liberal Democrat in terms of like that's kind of implying left Democrat, or like that's the way it's being employed, and it's like he's not. He's a corporate neoliberal. And same with this city council, which is credulously throughout the piece treated as if they were like maybe useful idiots, but earnestly committed to this idea of defunding the police, and there's no evidence for that. And you know, they don't talk about the fact that they just increased the police budget, and to characterize them as progressives and not to talk about what is their actual policy record here. What were the conditions that led to this massive uprising beyond like the protection of murderous police, but the pro-housing market policies. You don't get a sense of any of that in this piece, and it's like painting this picture of a progressive city council that doesn't really exist, you know? Could I say something else too? I'm not sure if this is the time. Because then it kind of cuts to, again, goes back to the moment in the park, right? After those. So it weirdly says that there's this week between city council meetings where everything changes.
All of it, like magically.
But I'm like... and then it gives like some clips of some protests that you don't know which protests are which. But did you get that part? I was confused.
Like, so in the course of that week, I might be wrong here, but I feel like things that come to mind is like the National Guard occupying our city for 4 days?
Yeah.
I think 4 or 5 days.
I don't remember how long it was.
It felt like a lot longer.
Yeah.
And then also something that comes to mind is like a semi truck nearly ramming over
gee,
like
yeah.
thousands of people on the bridge.
Yes.
Like it was a crazy ass week between those two meetings, and it like skips over what led to all this. Once again, like it just completely glosses over the sheer people power. And I forget who mentions it. Maybe Lisa Bender, when like they ask her about like community engagement, and she's like, yeah, there were thousands of people on the streets.
Yeah.
And it was like wild just seeing
Yes.
how many people poured out of their houses in that week, 2 weeks. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm not even sure the timeline of their saying the week between those two meetings lines up with the uprising. I think I'd like to go back and compare it date for date, but even in the way it's framed, I think that first meeting that they point towards like all these opportunities for reform, I think that was after a lot of the burning and looting maybe already happened, you know? Yeah, so it just, again, like completely obscures the uprisings.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the moment in Powderhorn Park and that action. And I think this is an important piece to zoom in on the podcast, is it says one of the most powerful social justice even inside this progressive bubble, one of the most powerful social justice organizations is Black Visions Collective. And I think it's important to pick apart that language, because what you never hear in this piece is that Black Visions Collective is a nonprofit that is foundation funded. Some people may consider them a powerful social justice organization, but if you're trying to actually define their role, that's like imprecise, obtuse language that doesn't help people understand what's happening. And again, I think serves to alienate the people who led the uprising. Black Visions Collective, were there to organize in a space that was created by the street movement that they did not lead. And it's important to be precise and to name the fact that they are a foundation-funded nonprofit, because that speaks to why City Council was on stage, why we were so comfortable moving the process through the charter channel. I don't want to get into necessarily debating all the different tactical and strategic considerations, but what can be agreed upon is that's like an establishment, nonprofit sanctioned route of organizing. And the way it's presented in this article as like the left flank of the city of Minneapolis, that's not true at all. That's a total misrepresentation that like plays into this, makes the city a lot more conservative than it really is. And this isn't like, there's people I respect in both Reclaim the Block and Black Visions Collective. There's also a lot of critique I have. This isn't even about to get into those specifics, but it's to name for all of us that the foundation role is obscured through when you use language like social justice organization and you don't dig deeper into that. There's like elements of power working that we're not seeing, and the branding, the idea that politics is a media operation. That's where I don't want to give too much credit to this piece, but in a way I do think it's true that like this, making this big media moment without the ability to follow up on the ground did derail some things and have a negative effect, Sorry, I just went ham.
Yeah, no, I just think remembering when I went to the Minnesota Council on Foundations conference a few years ago, like for work, they had Black Visions Collective like members present, and like in this room they had I think Alicia Garza speak. She was the keynote speaker, and that was like exciting, but also just felt, symbolic when she's speaking and saying Black Lives Matter in front of hundreds of people, mostly white folks, half of them, or maybe, about half of them from greater Minnesota, who are just like very uncomfortable for the hour, or just left during her talk, and then afterwards, like you could meet her and shake her hand, and Black Visions Collective was there. So that's when I like met some people from the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of like useful things in this podcast that I've noticed. Like I like the framing is atrocious and clearly came from someone not close to community here. But the useful things to me were like the fact that this meeting did like have a sway in terms of the overall attitude in the city, and like in terms of co-optation that happened pretty quickly. And then the other thing, which we'll get into eventually, or we've talked about a little bit, is just like exposing the city council.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people criticizing folks for criticizing the city council, being like, this is on the mayor, this is on the charter commission. But the city council is absolutely spineless for the most part, for the vast majority.
100%.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's another fundamental critique I have. And what was frustrating is I think it was cool that a lot of people put out refutations of this piece, and I value them. But I seen a lot of them really miss the mark, I think, because they also accepted this frame that it was an earnest, well-intended city council that got suffocated by the charter commission. And that's the premise put forward by this piece. I don't think there's evidence for that at all. And I think what you have to take into account is that if they were serious about this pledge, or if they were serious about abolition, you did not have to do the charter amendment this summer. In fact, it made it was nonsensical to go in that direction, because the city council has the power of the purse. They have the power to affect the budget. They are in the most powerful position to actually have an impact. And they used the language of veto-proof majority, but then moved the policy to an arena where veto-proof majority is meaningless. A veto-proof majority doesn't have an impact on the charter. It does mean you can override the veto of Jacob Fry to cut the police budget, and they refuse to do that. That's the obvious strategic move. I accept that eventually, yes, you have to change the charter amendment, and you could walk and chew gum at the same time. But the fact that they prioritize that is an obvious act of political sabotage that was conscious by people who have been refusing to cut the MPD's budget. They were not up there in good faith. Even if you hear the text messages and stuff, they admitted it right in front of your face. So it's and to hear people refuting this story, but then defending the city council is like, no, you're missing the point. The city council collaborated with the charter commission to tank the movement. That's what happened.
Should we talk about like who got the most airtime on this?
Hey, because I tell you what, if you want to hear from the people of Minneapolis.
Oh my gosh. So I was looking at this. So like Kathy Span not only gets the most time and is able to elucidate her thoughts, because a lot of the other interviews, they like slowly fade out, and then like Asted like kind of synopsizes what they were saying. But like just like time for her to like express her thoughts. Also in person, like actually in the field interviews that were done with her, and the only other person was Linnea Palmisano, who's the most ideologically opposed to any scent of abolition.
It really says a lot about who they came here to talk to.
Yeah, like just that. I was like, it could be that like that's how it shaked out, but like you have to put effort into like organizing those field interviews where you get that good audio, and it was clear they were outside. But I looked into some of the, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like history, I guess.
Nice.
But yeah, so Kathy Span ran against Jeremiah, and that's who she ends up criticizing for most of the interview. I don't know if you want to speak on that.
I just think it's malpractice as a journalist to interview her. Claimed that she represented this. It literally said, if you talk to the people of Minneapolis, they don't want abolition.
It was like a turning moment.
And it cuts to someone who lost to Jeremiah Ellison running on a Law and Order platform, but they don't mention that in the piece.
Not only lost, got fourth place and 159 votes.
And is also the head of a neighborhood organization. If you know anything about Minneapolis politics, that's one of the most conservative spaces in the city.
She's the executive director of the Jordan Area Community Council. But in the New York Times article, they just describe her as a community activist. And they totally omit like any of her connections to the council, or just that she's in a position of power. Like she's not just like this scrappy grassroots organizer, fighting to the top or whatever, but like, she's in a position of power and paid for that, for her work. And they didn't include her soundbite like in this in the published article when she's talking about her, like who she would call, like she would want to call the police for domestic violence, for a mental health of a child, etc. They just say that she wants more police officers. Yeah.
Yeah. On her website, it says she literally has been doing ride-alongs with the cops for years. So it's like not to discount people's experiences this summer. I know people who have experienced an increase in gun violence in the neighborhood. I'm not discounting that, but Kathy Span has been beating that drum for decades. You know what I'm saying? Literally, and has a vested real estate interest. Yeah. And to make her the stand-in for the city or the bellwether of the political opinion in the city is like a joke.
And just like how they dramatize, like she's like, I'm going to sue the city. They're infringing on my civil rights. I'm going to sue the city. And like, don't go into the specifics on that lawsuit whatsoever. They don't talk about how the people litigating this lawsuit, I wrote them down somewhere. The Upper Midwest Law Center, like a right-wing think tank that's interested in like preserving like right-wing ideology and dealing with public union nuisance. Has on their I think is like an advisory board, but they have like crazy right-wing like Doug Wardlow, who is the crazy right-wing politician who ran against Keith Ellison for attorney general and like had a lot of anti-Semitic and just racist propaganda in that race. But like just insidious folks that are backing her up in this lawsuit that they just completely gloss over. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so fucked.
Bad.
That's so fucked up.
Yeah. That's crazy. Damn, I just had a thought, but I forgot what it was. Oh, this is a good moment, I think, just to say another thing I noticed is like, you really wouldn't know how violent the Minneapolis police are listening to this. It like, that's another way that it strips it of the context is like, it actually says in one point, it blames the pledge on police behavior. You know, it's like, you know, the pledge did have an impact on police. And what you're supposed to take from that is like that we're not allowed to call for abolition because then it make the police mad and they might stop showing up.
Feelings.
As opposed to like this is a violent fascist organization that's been terrorizing people for decades and did a coordinated political work stoppage. Like, what the fuck? That's like, again, negligence as a reporter, I feel like.
Yeah, it's like simultaneously blaming this work stoppage on the pledge while also blaming an increase in crime on the pledge as well.
Yes.
And like, I think he says like, there's no way to say this for certain, but like, you're just completely ignoring what's happening. Like we're in a fucking pandemic and there's record unemployment. It's like the biggest depression ever in this country's fucking history. And you're blaming it on like some politicians making a facile commitment in a park with like 1,000 like white homeowners.
And then it cuts to Kathy Span saying, I think some people just heard defund, no cops, and the criminal element just went ham. And it's like, what? Yeah.
And like, yeah, we've been hearing gunshots a lot. Like, I grew up in this neighborhood. There's gunshots.
Right.
Like, the crime is way lower than it was in the 90s. Like, this is still like this era is still record lows for violent crime. So it's like just like nauseous how they are spinning this and like successfully getting people whipped up about it. Like,
yeah. City Pages and their little like number thing. I always read those. But they were like talking about how crime has like increased and 17%, I think, since last year. And then having like the 5-year span, 5 years ago, it's increased since 5 years ago. But as far as like having a more comparative analysis of like when Minneapolis had the nickname Murderapolis, right? That was in the 90s.
Yeah. Hey, was it the New York Times who gave us that?
I'm not sure.
I think it was a national newspaper, but I'm not sure if it was the New York Times.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, that's super real. And, it's frustrating to see those narratives being deployed by the city council now. I think there's a way to be responsible, and I'm not saying you don't talk about it, but it just shows how fickle their commitment is and how little they really understand or take seriously the philosophy of abolition or the real work, because it's so easy to use the higher crime rates as a cudgel to like undermine their own supposed argument of defunding the police. And I think now that I'm thinking about it again, it's like useful idiots is a good word for them, because even though they come off looking really bad in this piece, they're also like, they gave them the alley-oop, just like they gave the Charter Amendment the alley-oop to just like dunk on our fucking faces by like setting it up in this way. I feel like they played a part in like discrediting what is a very powerful movement for abolition that has much popular support in the Twin Cities and has answers for some of these questions. They have Kathy Span talking about, do you have a plan? It's like, yes, there's a lot of plans.
So
there's certainly are plans.
So many plans.
Yeah. So it's like, that is just lazy reporting, I feel like. The other thing I noticed is they don't mention that there was a whole budget process that happened this summer where they had to revise the budget because of COVID, and that was a perfect way to understand the function of the charter amendment process. Is everybody was talking about the charter amendment process, where all of a sudden the city council had no power and they're the victims, but they had a veto proof majority in an unprecedented situation to cut the budget, where we were facing a hundreds of millions of dollars shortfall, and they barely touched it and they barely talked about it. If they could have took the energy from this summer and in a sustained way, we could have cut $50 million from the budget. That's what, and I don't know the internal dynamics of what happens with Reclaim the Block or Black Business Collective, but that's where I feel like the Powderhorn meeting pivoted us away from a strategy like that could have not centered the city council, not pushed us towards the charter amendment. Like there's tons of potential that got wasted this summer.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa Bender mentions that like she wasn't comfortable committing to a budget decrease, and that's very telling.
Yes.
Like she was okay with like committing to ending policing as we know it, and then being able to backtrack and be like, I didn't think like it was how I knew it, not how all y'all knew it, but I don't know. It just gave them a really clean out and a place to place blame at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or as Johnson tactfully put it, all you have to do is just change the name MPD, and that's changing police as we know it.
Yeah. Which is like you start to see them deploy, and I'm glad that he shared that. And what a snivelly little snitch! Like he even flipped on his own. Like he was dry snitching on somebody. What a hoe this guy is! God.
If you're in his ward, vote him out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky ward.
It is. I honestly say this though. I'm sorry. Like if you see Andrew Johnson and you don't heckle him, I question your commitment to
It would just be hard to
tell
him apart from the rest of the bland white glasses mans.
I even tweeted at him the moment I heard this, and then I deleted it because I was like, was I thinking of the right guy?
Is that the right Andrew
He's tall,
Johnson?
he has glasses.
Yeah. I didn't mean that. Oh my God.
Easily the like lowest point for like the most, like there's so many moments where I just like felt the tension in my body, but when hearing Andrew Johnson speak throughout this, it was just
I was yelling,
just enraging.
Yeah.
I think another sleazy tactic that I heard employed through this whole podcast was the allusions to calls for abolition helping Trump. They like flirt. They flirt with saying that a couple times. They kind of say it and retract it, and they even have sound bites of him. And that is the oldest liberal trick in the book. They'll call anybody a radical socialist.
Yeah.
And the liberals don't know how to stand on any principles. They don't really believe in this shit, so they can only triangulate. And it's like, no, we're gonna abolish the police. Try to stop us. We understand we're gonna have to win against these people, and standing on your ideas, like you can't triangulate in that way. And then it's like entertains the idea that like, just so you know, Joe Biden doesn't want to defund the police. It's like, oh,
case you're
wondering. Crack reporting, bro.
Wait, why should I vote for him again?
Well, and then it like comes to these absolutes where it's like distancing themselves from the left and these like overarching policies has helped Mayor Fry, who's so unpopular. Like if you're in the city, I was just getting a haircut today and we were shit talking Mayor Fry, like saying it helped him and then saying it's helping Biden. Like someone who could like even give like a commitment in like a speech about Medicare for all and his polling numbers would go up just because it's so popular, and saying that like distancing himself from extremely popular policies amongst even Republicans, for fuck's sake, would hurt his campaign.
Just a joke. Some voters think Joe Biden hasn't done enough to denounce violent rioting. I'm like, who? What the fuck are you talking about? I also question, like, sometime I'd like to really dig into studying the science of polls, but just how freely and loosely they play with the polls. And this is like, I don't believe you, bro.
I looked into it a little bit.
Really? What'd you find?
So it was like a Mason-Dixon poll, or Mason something. Not Mason-Dixon. Mason University.
That sounds fishy.
I kind of looked into it. But it was like only registered voters that they polled. So I think that alone is like, you're missing like what, roughly a third I kind of tried to look up
Yeah.
like registered voters by city, but I found like Hennepin County is like about a third of the like voting age population isn't registered. So that whole wide swath of the city or the county would be nowhere near this poll.
Automatically
They wouldn't
discounted. Yeah.
So I don't know.
So you're not capturing like Gen Z or whoever's
a
like
lot
the
of young,
youngest
and
generation.
they don't even poll like teenagers or people that are most likely to be fucked with by the cops, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, even further, then it's not like they're talking to every voter.
Yeah.
I've never been polled. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like
how do they call people?
I don't know.
The sample was like 800, and then I think they added like a certain amount to get this like white versus black narrative in the story or in the poll story. And yeah, so 800 out of a city of over 400,000
Yeah.
Yeah.
randomized. I think it was like 30% were landlines, because apparently there's still landlines out there. Maybe they polled my parents, who knows? And like 70%, yeah, were cell phone randomly, supposedly.
But I never pick up my phone if it's an unknown
Yeah.
number. Like
Me neither.
who? Yeah.
Excludes the indebted. Right.
True, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave like age and like race breakdowns, and they were like honest about that, I guess. But I still like polls. Like clearly, we know polls don't mean shit after
Yeah. I
2016.
I know, but they're held with such high regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's important that you point out those fundamental exclusions from the polling data, people who aren't registered voters and, you know, people who are young people. And again, the way they're excluded from the narrative completely when they created all of this opportunity. It was not just young people, but it was poor people, young people, people who probably don't vote or get polled,
Unhoused
who risked
people.
their fucking
Yeah.
lives and really went to war with the cops in the streets. And they are the core of power in this situation, and they get written off completely, you know. And that's unfortunate. And it's like I want to, I guess, in the spirit of like solidarity, is like I'm speaking critically, but I'm speaking humbly, you know. So it's like not to like disrespect the organizing of any groups or whatever, but some people we're asking like, well, okay, if it wasn't the Powderhorn meeting, then what do you do? And it's not to say that we have easy answers, but I think some simple answers would be like to orient more towards the power in the street that might not translate into votes in the short term, or might not be, might not attract the media attention like the city council, but that could have moved us in a different trajectory as opposed to like putting the same tired ass Democrat city council on center stage. I think that's like some of the pivots we could make moving forward that are, again, the Ford Foundation would encourage you to go the other direction. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, it's like we want revolutionary change, but we're going to try to change the charter real quick. Like,
Right. Before we have to. Yeah. Don't worry about that budget right there. Yeah. Did you, Deanna, have any other like standouts from the article? We kind of reacted mainly to the podcast, but it also came in tandem with a written piece.
Yeah. I just had like little, I don't like, you know, to note, if you didn't listen to the daily, Ms. Canal did not respond, nor other unnamed city council. I mean, I guess you could just figure out by who wasn't speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. But she, you know, they made a note of that. She didn't respond to New York Times request to be interviewed. I just thought there was like a funny-ish, like highly detailed moment about Lisa Bender. I wasn't sure it was supposed to be like her Condoleezza Rice shopping for shoes in Manhattan during Hurricane Katrina moment, because she was unreachable when George Floyd was being lynched, since she was completing a wilderness trek with her family in northeast Minnesota near Canada. And I was like, this is a highly descriptive explanation of where Lisa Bender was.
Yeah.
But that when she returned to Minneapolis, she had immediate concerns about the pledge. So by the time she was back, she was like, not here for it. And also what they were frustrated was that the pledge was an embrace of a police-free ideal with no transition plan. And that they which is frustrating. Happens all the time with anyone or any group that points out a problem, that they're expected to immediately have a action plan and that solution to the problem. And it's just, it then disincentivizes anyone to actually say, hey, there is this problem. Not that like people haven't been saying that for fucking decades, that there's a problem. So to like put it on like nonprofits, to put it on grassroots orgs is, I don't know. It's just, again, I think this other shift of responsibility, not actually taking ownership or accountability for this elected position that they're in.
Absolutely.
Oh, and then Palmisano.
Hey, Palmisano.
Formerly of United Health Group.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
I was reading something, but yeah, I think before she ran, she was working for United Health Group.
You mean United Health Group, the largest private insurer in the country that makes billions of dollars off
like
sickness
some,
and death?
Developmental manager or something. But I hadn't known that until a few days ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a really important piece of information. That's crazy.
Well, her cute little soundbite is, I'm not taking any pledge. If that means people throw bottles at me, then fine.
Yeah. What's fucked up is that the other council members' sliminess made her, you kind of had to acknowledge her integrity in a sense. And that at least you kept it 1,000, you know, you didn't believe in this pledge and you don't feel like you have to pander because your constituency is different. You were like, nope, I don't believe in that shit. And that's what one thing that they accidentally get right in this piece too, is like Jacob Fry is not popular in the city of Minneapolis, but it was such a moment of joy for people to see him get clowned at that march. But then even I started to realize that this summer is like he won points with his constituency after that. He showed that he is not going to be bullied. And he definitely showed more integrity than Andrew Johnson. You know what I'm saying? Like, so in that sense, it's like, you know, they obviously were here to like shine Jacob Fry and Palmisano and them, but like, Jacob
Fry, a notorious outside agitator from Virginia, career politician in the making. Like, he's clearly just, you know, going along with the establishment, endorsing Amy Klobuchar, and then he'll run for some like higher office. Like that's track that he's clearly progressing through, or wants to progress through.
And he's been incredibly effective for real estate, you know, and for industry. Like, he's an operator, you know, he has an ideological project and a vision, and he is working it, you know, and he doesn't give a fuck about the people who get killed by the police, like straight up.
Yeah. Maybe one day he'll make it onto ABC and sit next to Chris Christie.
Oh, dang. He will have that type of trajectory.
He'll totally do
about that.
I'd rather see
He's
him
very
on
TV
like...
ready, you know? I hate when people are like, oh, Minneapolis mayor, he's a snack.
Yeah,
like,
for real, they
do. I'd rather see him end up on like Dancing with the Stars. I think that would be a more appropriate career trajectory. But
yeah, it'll be like a hybrid, like a political sports show. You know, it'll be like Cover the Running Community or something like that, or like Good Morning America segment where it's like running with local electeds.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know you guys aren't into Bachelor Nation. I am, but one of the Bachelor people, Tyler Cameron, he does a running segment. And I feel like they kind of look alike too. It would work.
That's what Kelly got to listen to this one because she's a Bachelor Nation.
Okay, I need to talk to her.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, his face is really symmetrical. Is there anything else we want to touch on? I mean, there's like so much material in this like 40-minute podcast. It's just,
Yeah, how long is this? Is this equally 40 minutes long?
Yeah, we're like nudging up there.
I did a last little grocery list to try to like sum up my thoughts that just said, literally talks to no one involved in the uprising, zero mention of George Floyd Square, no mention of the COVID budget rework, talks to no one that is not, that's a weird way to say it, talks to no one that is not a nonprofit professional or city official.
I saw you got some pushback on that one.
Yeah. Did y'all see that? Can we talk about that for a moment?
Yeah.
Because this, I think, was really instructive. This guy, I guess his name is Larry Jacobs. He's the director of the study of politics and governance or some
Yeah.
shit like that at the Humphrey School, right? And I seen he tweeted, what a hard-hitting piece that is a lesson to these pieces of shit that try to get something for themselves to just cool down, basically is what
Yeah.
but he like frames this piece. So I commented on his post and said, how does this qualify as hard-hitting reporting when they didn't talk to anybody who was not a nonprofit or a government leader? And he thought he dropped a bomb on me when he said, excuse me, they interviewed someone from Black Visions Collective. Do they count as nonprofit leaders? And I said, like, yes, absolutely. They count as nonprofit leaders. And then he couldn't. And then he literally quote tweeted me again and said,
Yeah.
did you read the piece? They talked to Black Visions Collective. And I had to think, like, I was reflecting on it with my brother, and it's basically, to him, they're like the Black Liberation Army. You know what I'm saying? They like hear the word abolition, and he sees the piece, and in his worldview, he can't comprehend that they're a foundation-funded organization, or there might be Black people in Minneapolis even more radical than them. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Or it's everybody's playing their like prescribed role, you know, and
Yeah.
they represent the total Black voice, the voice of all Black youth, and to it literally where it's like, bro, you're the director of a school at the Humphrey and you can't be bothered to Google this shit.
Oy.
It's just like the standards are
making
really
like
low.
6 figures, I'm sure.
The ideology, that's what I'm realizing is like, I think it counts with this New York Times piece. It's like, these are the institutions that are taken very seriously, but the ideological project they're on requires them to be so obtuse and lazy, and the standards are really low, you know? Like, Hubert Humphrey, though, was also, to my understanding, like an aggressive enemy of the left,
Co-opter,
right?
yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Cool.
All right. This was fun. Thank you for letting me come over. I've been stewing over this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't mention Bob Kroll.
No.
There were like so many incredible actions this summer.
Yeah.
Like so
Yeah.
many. Yeah.
Yeah, the one word I came to, Copaganda.
Copaganda.
That's what this was, straight up. Like,
Absolutely.
it has no critical analysis of the MPD's role in this city. Not
Other
for-
than like, yeah, in a soft way, puffing them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they called it the field, the nerve. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's their series, yeah.
Yeah. Today, we continue our look.
Man.
Any other?
Don't seriously listen to or read anything the New York Times puts out. Unless it's like a contributor, I'd say. Like, there's been like good
Like an
contributors.
op-ed.
Yeah, an op-ed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess again, like kind of how we started, like it may seem redundant, but I'm realizing like I'm hoping this podcast reaches people who don't necessarily pay attention to politics all day. And it's like to just remind each other and build a culture of like, don't let the right wing co-opt that term fake news and then make you think you're supposed to trust the New York Times. Like
Yeah.
this is corporate media, you know, and it's, you have to engage with things critically. You have to look for multiple sources and you have to spend the time dissecting what you're taking in, because we're taking in so much misinformation that it's like has a hey, I'm podcasting.
Yeah.
The Parmesano.
I tried looking up who owns the New York Times once, but like it was very, very difficult. All I could figure out was like, as far as now, they're just kind of owned by a opaque board of directors. That it's difficult. I don't know if anyone has any information as to who actually owns the New York Times.
Yeah.
I would love to hear it.
I
See that.
looked at the board before I came. I couldn't get good sense of who the ownership is.
Yeah.
But you know, it was like who you'd imagine on the board. I can't remember exactly, but like big corporate representatives, and
Yeah.
representatives of big banks, and yeah.
Yeah.
It made me think of like them videos, because I seen some of them faces when they were interviewing all the presidential candidates in the before times. You know, that was
Yeah, with the op-ed
round
board.
table?
And they said, "Hey, look, I don't suffer bullshit very well." So,
Yeah.
yeah.
With Mayor Pete, they're like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
were fixing bread prices. That's one I really remember.
Yeah, that was probably the best one. Thanks for listening to this. Thanks for subscribing to
Yeah.
the Patreon. We really appreciate it. you know, if you like this one and you appreciate it, you know, if you could share it out with the world and help get us closer to our goal of 200, we're making good progress. We just put in the order for some swag bags that are coming out to the cheese level patrons.
Thank you.
Hell yeah. So thanks for joining us on the nice back porch. Money,
Power,
Land.
solidarity.
We need money, land, solidarity. If you funny, stand very far away from me. We have running plans about as far as they can see to keep them coming. Bands building up the company. Shauna told me I was gonna be prosperous. I